This fly is Mike Mercer's PMD Cripple. It's an extremely effective fly, but it's also a pretty complicated fly. It's got a lot of steps, and it's got some epoxy work into it. We're going to forego the epoxy work, but it's just the wing case is all that's been epoxied. But it's a pretty complicated fly, but it's worth the effort. It's really extremely effective fly. So what we're going to start with is the hook. It's a 200R. It's a long shank hook. It's designed to show, this fly is designed to show the emergent fly. Part of it's emerged out of its nymphal case, and part of it's still hanging in the water. So the first thing we're going to do is take some crinkly Zelon in the brown, and this is designed to be the tail and a little bit of the trailing shuck. The tails are kind of coming together, so you don't really want a lot of tail here, just enough to represent the natural tail. And I'm going to take this to approximately the halfway point. And again, I just can't overemphasize how important it is to have your hook be using your hook to judge your proportions to your fly. And on this, when you look at it, if you think you've got a little bit extra or you don't, just go ahead and trim it. And the flies that are in the book are actually the guys who designed them, sent the flies to me, and they're all their ties. And so all of us have a little different style, and so Mike's fly and my fly may be a little different, and we'll all do adaptations to everybody's flies because we find in one region we need a thicker fly or a thinner fly or whatever. So this may or may not be exactly how Mike would tie it, and that's to say that I could tie it as well as Mike could, because Mike is just a spectacular tyer, one of the best there is. So I may not make it look quite as pretty as Mike does. The beauty of the fly, though, is that it's so well designed and so well thought up that even I can tie it and make it fish well. So.
Okay, don't forget to say that you just tied in some crystal hair.
What I tied in, next I'm tying in the rib, and what that is I've got 3 strands of crystal flash here, and that's going to be the rib, and then I've got some superfine dubbing here that I've mixed up for the color that I like. Mike likes an orangish tan dubbing. This is just a blend of 3 colors that I like. It's olive and brown and cinnamon caddis, and it's just a blend that I like, and I encourage people to use the colors. Take a natural and look at it and see if you can blend your own colors, and they all change and they get wet. It's critical that when you're doing this, you tie a little bit of it on the fly, dub it up, put it in a glass of water, and look and make sure you're getting the color that you want. We're just going to dub this onto this brown thread is what's called for. It's what I use also. It's a 6/0 brown thread. I'm just dubbing this on. I'm going to have a relatively thick body on this fly because, again, it's a nymph, and nymphs are pretty. This is representing the nymphal case. The fly's emerging, so there's an adult inside the nymph, and you're going to have gills and things like that to make the fly look thicker. And I'm going to go up and back down. I don't like to try to build the bulk in one run. I like to get a basic shape and then go back and forth over it, especially on these nymphs where I want it to sink. I'm not worried about weight. I'm just worrying about the proper shape of this abdomen. And gonna build that up. This fly has several steps that, again, makes it even more critical that if you, and that's, I think all of us get in the same rut a little bit as we see the photograph or we see the original fly, and we're trying to make it as close to that fly as possible. And if you're doing that, it becomes really critical that you use this hook as a gauge. And because I've tied a few of these but not a lot, it's even more important for me to keep check of my proportions here. What what the original was and what I'm trying to emulate. I use 3 strands of this crystal flash, and then I spin them one direction. And every time I turn that fly, it has a tendency to want to spin on me. The only reason I use 3 is because I tend to, the fish eat this fly. If they've only got 1 and they break it, and I think it's pretty critical, this it gives it just the right amount of flash. If they break the 1, I've got an extra one there to actually 2 there to keep the flash in. And so it makes a nice even ribbing. And if a fish's tooth gets in there and busts one of those, I've still got a backup of a couple. Now, the next thing is the wing case. And Mike uses, on the original, Mike uses a turkey quill for a wing case. And I'm going to use some Antron yarn, and I've been using this lately on several of my wing cases. I've been using it on some of my just standard hare's ear patterns, and I've been trying some of Mike's epoxy hare's ear stuff. It does 2 things for me. One, it adds a little weight, so it makes the fly go down, but it also gives a little shine and translucency, and everybody knows how successful beadheads have been. And when I use this Antron, when I put the epoxy over it, again, I get a little translucent shine out of this stuff, and I really think it dresses up the fly. And this is just a coffee brown Antron. And I'm going to tie this in, trim this off, and I'm going to trim it off the length I want the actual wing case to be. And again, it's because I have so many steps here that I have to follow to make Mike's fly accurate. I need things to tell me this is where I'm going to stop that wing case. The next thing Mike uses here on his fly is gray marabou for the gills. And what I've got is I've got a small grizzly hackle, and I'm going to use the after shaft, or the bottom portion of the hackle that's just, it's marabou type material. The thing I like about this stuff is it's barred, and I get a 2-part effect of this stuff. It's a little more difficult to tie in, but I tie in one side just to tie that in, and then I'm going to take, it's easy, the other nice thing about using the hackle shaft is, you see I split, I don't know if you can see that, I split that much off the one side, so I'm going to get an even amount simply by going to the other side of the feather and taking the exact same amount off. Gives me nice even gill lengths. And just tie that in on the other side. And the reason I did the wing case first is so I had something to split the gills off to the side. Now we're going to go back in here, dub this, dub the rest of this thread with, continue the dimensions that you had, that you started with your abdomen. It's about the same dimension as the thorax is about the same dimension as the abdomen. So again, I'm going to wrap that forward right to where the wing case is going to end. And right there. And now this is where the fly gets, gets a little tricky. When I first tied this fly, there's a forward post on the wing post, which you're going to visual when it's in the water. And you can use Zelon, calf tail, you can use anything that is visible. I'm going to use a piece of calf tail here. But the next step I'm going to do is kind of like the final step here if you were doing it in a traditional fashion from tail to head. But it's a lot easier to get this done right now than to try to tie it in when we start doing all the rest of the steps here. So this is a visual thing. This is what you're going to be looking at because most of this fly, this back side of the fly from the wing case back, is going to be underwater. So I'm going to tie this wing in and right back to the wing case here. Okay. Now I'm going to take the, I frequently just double check and look at things. I'm going to look at the wing case, make sure everything's laying where I want it to before I do anything else. Alright. I'm going to tie in this wing case, and I want you to notice something right there. When you tie in a wing case, you've got, and this one's going to have epoxy over it also, but you don't want too much of a hump right here when you're going to put epoxy on. If you weren't going to epoxy this and you wanted that effect of a wing bulging inside there, you'd want it kind of humped up like this. But because I'm going to tie in with epoxy, when I'm going to finish it, I'm going to draw it down just a little tighter because I know the epoxy is going to build a little bit of bulk into that. And the final step is to take a ginger hackle. I've got a saddle hackle here, and tie this in. And what this is going to be, this is going to simulate the nymph, or the dun, crawling out of the nymphal case. So everything behind this is going to be the nymphal case. And then now we're going to tie in this ginger hackle. And you can see if I had tried to tie, I'm going to finish this all the way forward. My hackle pliers, but now I'm just going to finish this off. And the fly is actually going to ride with all of that abdomen down in the water, and it's going to ride on this hackle. So you can see if I had tried to tie that wing in, this visual wing, last, I wouldn't have had much to tie into with all this hackle here. I'm just going to finish this off. So now I've got the wing here, or the gills here. I think those are just a touch long. I'm just going to nip a little of that off. But at this point, what I would do, and we're not going to show it because we'd have to use the epoxy, we'd have to epoxy this, but you'd simply, what I do when I make my own is I don't rotate the epoxy because I don't want it to go around the fly. What I do is I get this out of the way, the hackle, and I make sure this is there, and I set these on a piece of styrofoam. And I set them as level, I got you out of focus here a little bit. I set them as level as I can into the styrofoam so that the epoxy doesn't want to run off to the sides. And I usually, when I work with epoxy, when I'm doing these wing cases, whether it's one of these or if it's one of the, when I'm doing the shell-backed hare's ears, I do like a dozen of them at a time, and I work with the 5-minute epoxy, and then I simply take mix it up, take my bodkin, and do a drop on the top of each one of them. And then I let that one set, and if they do a pretty good job, I leave it. If not, I go back and I do another mix, and I come back and simply put another drop right on top of that. And that's as far as I go with it. But I never do that in a vise, and I never try to rotate them so it ends up all over the fly. On this particular type of fly, at least, you're just trying to do the wing case. So as you can see, what we've got here, we've got a wing that you're going to see, and this is supposed to represent the wing case, or the wings, the actual wings coming out of the nymph. And then this is the legs sticking out, and this is going to all ride, hope you can still see this. It's all going to ride kind of straight up and down in the water column like that. And the water would be right here. All of this from here down is going to be underwater. And so all you're going to see sticking up is the wing, and it's going to ride on these hackle tips.